Welcome to the Counter Narrative Podcast, a show designed to change the way we talk and think about education. By sharing stories of successes and triumphs, we aim to challenge the dominant narrative that often negatively portrays our disenfranchised populations. I'm your host, Charles Williams, an urban educator for more than 15 years, a current school principal in Chicago, an educational consultant, an equity advocate, and the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office. Let's get started. Before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to tell you about a super exciting event that I have coming up, and I would love for you to be in attendance. As I mentioned in the intro to the show, I am the co-host of Inside the Principal's Office, a web series that runs live on the first and third Saturday of each month. During the show, my co-host Michael McWilliams and I bring on other educational leaders and discuss the most pressing issues and topics facing us today. We also have a Facebook group where educators can connect and learn from each other. Well, this summer, we're planning to host an event where we can get together in person. That's right, not another Zoom or a Google Meet, but live. Even better, it's only $35. So join us in Dallas for a networking reception on Friday, July 30th, followed by a day of activities on Saturday, July 31st. Stop by our Twitter page, join us on Facebook, or check out an upcoming episode for more information. I look forward to finally meeting you. In this episode, I chat with Melinda Arnost, a witty K-12 intervention specialist that is always thinking outside the box. This curly-haired educator loves everything about teaching, minus the paperwork and standardized tests. Melinda has her master's degree in education, is a personal trainer for students with unique abilities, and is an autism guru. She has a passion for building relationships with students and colleagues and can embrace inclusion in any type of setting. Melinda started an adaptive nonprofit ice skating program for individuals with unique abilities and runs marathons while pushing her pal Annie in a Hoyt running chair. She believes people, regardless of their lack of ability, should feel included, supported, and loved. Melinda lives in the woods with her husband, who is an automotive enthusiast in Ohio. When she is not writing or teaching, she is busy running extreme distances, painting murals, or trying to build her own secret garden. During our conversation, we talked about relationships. Yes, relationships. But not just between students and teachers, but between teachers and interventionists. Melinda shared how many of the disconnects that we see with our diverse learners are actually due to the lack of communication and being on the same page. We also talked about the power of inclusion and what happens when all students are able to receive the tools needed to learn in the same spaces. Melinda talked about how educators fear the labels that students carry and judge them before they even enter the class, and how connecting with other staff and students can help to dispel those misconceptions. And maybe, just maybe, we redefined what PD should actually mean. Enjoy. So sorry about that, listeners. We had a small technical difficulty, and it seems, Batsheva, if you are listening, I blame you, because ever since I told you I record straight through without editing, without doing anything, this has seemed to have happened. So I'm blaming you for this one. But Melinda, right before we jumped out, we were talking about this idea of UDL and really making sure that everybody has tools, regardless of labels or not. So go ahead and jump back in with your thoughts there.
Yeah. And you know what? Thank goodness we're both flexible thinkers, and that if there is an issue, we can just fix it and jump right back in, right? Without getting too upset. So that's good.
Exactly. That's what we do as educators, right?
Yes, this happens all the time if you're an educator. Um, yeah, I just feel like just having accommodations for everybody, not just again the ones labeled or the ones with the IEP. I feel like far too often that there's like a negative notation around that too. So if someone has visuals as their accommodation, they almost think it's cheating if everybody else has visuals, even though it would benefit so many more people, right? We're all different learners. And yeah, unfortunately. And I think a lot of the times too, a lot of students aren't a part of their IEP process. So sometimes
Mm.
accommodations are like a given, like they're already automatically on there without asking the student how they feel. Like I've seen in middle school, a lot of the times small group testing was just put on there year after year after year. And a lot of my
Mm-hmm,
students
mm-hmm.
hated being removed. I mean, they had to stand up and go to a different room for testing. And of course, it was the same, 5 every time until we started mixing it up. And it's like, hey, who wants small group? Just asking. And so that way the room's kind of split because a lot of students that didn't need it wanted it. And so they came to, the resource room and half of them stayed back. So, but yeah, I feel like a lot of the times they should just be for every student should, right? Individualized differentiation. That's the buzzword that
Yeah.
you want students to succeed. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? Like to think about that when you really stop to think about it. Like, wait a second, we are going to deny you a resource or a tool that will help you to be successful, yet we want you to be successful. And it's not like we're like giving you the answers or,
Right.
here's a calculator to do basic calculate or whatever it may be. It's like, no, like, do you need a smaller, quieter space to test, even though you don't have a piece of paper that says you should? That's fine. Like, come on, let's go. And vice versa. Like you mentioned, how embarrassing is that for a student to be like, all right, yeah, it's my turn to stand up and go to that other room. And right before, not that I advocate for them, but a high stakes standardized test. And now
Right.
you've just embarrassed the student. And then you're like, well, why didn't they perform well? Like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know.
Exactly. Maybe the anxiety
Hmm.
they had before when they had to leave the room in front of everyone. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but and again, it comes back to this idea, right? Again, what are we doing to contribute to the outcomes that we are seeing? And it just keeps coming back to that. And how could we do things differently and stop doing things the same way just because?
Very true. A lot of people resist change. So,
Well, Melinda, I know I said this in the beginning, and I told you that I would tell you towards the end of our conversation, but I definitely want to say thank you. But before we close out, one of the things I know listeners, as I said earlier at the very start of this, connecting with you allowed me to expand my network. I now have someone else in my repertoire, right? Someone else I could reach out to and say, hey, you know what? I have a question. I want to bounce an idea off of you. And, I encourage listeners for you to do the same thing. Always continue to grow. Always have your various spaces in which you could connect. So, Melinda, how can listeners find you if they want to connect?
yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook with its Empowering Inclusion Toolbox. I just released a book that kind of talks about all this cool inclusion stuff. So if you want even more info, I have a pretty user friendly, it has some of my illustrations. It's pretty witty and it's an easy read. It's Empowering Inclusion, the tool teachers need to help all students succeed. And it's on Amazon.
Very nice. So I will make sure that I include all of those in the show notes. And I will make sure that I also pick up a copy, not just to support you, but to better my understanding and growth as an educator. So Melinda, I just want to say thank you, not for just being a guest on the show. I do appreciate you, being here and sharing these words, but also thank you again just for the amazing work that you're doing and providing students with opportunities that unfortunately in many spaces they wouldn't get.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you as well. I mean, you were an awesome principal and just a podcast speaker, and it's just been a joy listening to you as well.
Oh, I appreciate you. Well, you take care, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.
You too.
I want to thank you for listening to the Counter Narrative Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and of course, share it with friends and family. I'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show, so please leave a comment or two as well. Now, I'm not sure what platform you're using, but the show can be found on Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and plenty of other platforms. If the show isn't on your preferred site, let me know, and I'll be sure to get it up and running. This podcast is also featured on schoolrubric.com, where you can find educational articles, videos, and interviews with educators from around the globe. Be sure to connect with me and other listeners by following the show on Twitter at the CN Podcast and joining the show's Facebook group. Take care.